Howdy y'all, I'm Joe Hughes, and thank you for joining me today. I'm here to give a two-part presentation titled Veeam Automation with PowerShell Deep Dive, Configuration, Reporting, and Testing, oh my. We'll be starting the first part of this presentation off with some basics of using PowerShell, tricks for data manipulation in PowerShell, how to pull information from your Veeam environment, and then some demo code to look at. So please feel free to ask questions about the topics that we're going to cover in the session, and I will do my best to address them all during the chat. There will be additional resources in a slide at the end, and I'll be sure to call these out for everyone, along with pasting the links to those resources in the chat at the end of the session. So with that, let's get started. So the agenda of topics we're actually going to start with today, we're going to start on PowerShell and Veeam basics, right? Some tips, tricks, and gotchas. Reporting on Veeam with PowerShell. We're going to discuss understanding the Veeam objects themselves, which also helps us to understand where to start for reporting on specific items. And then we're going to dig into lots and lots of PowerShell demos. Let's get started. So, starting at the beginning, right? Heads up for everyone, this is my usual speech to the user groups, and it's not just relevant for code. Defining a goal, right? This is the same whether you are using the GUI or the CLI. Plan for success always, right? Expect difficulties and failures, be prepared to adjust your plan, but still plan for success. As part of your plan, define it well and be explicit with facts, assumptions, and minimum requirements. Speed and performance are great, but they are an advantage to the organization, not the true benefit of automation. Think about the real benefit to the business, which is accuracy and repeatability. It's not just about impressing someone with your code. It's not just about doing it fast. It's about doing it correctly and being certain that it stays that way over time. Right? Focusing on standardization, validation, and efficiency gained. The goal of these efforts is about getting your operations into code, and it's the benefits that you gain from that. Right? We get into standardization, granular control, validation of configurations, and testing for success. We need to build and maintain tools in this fashion, and then our tools are now mirroring our internal environment and operations. This makes it much easier to improve or even rewrite these tools, even as we change platforms or technologies, which is what really matters to the business long term. Using small and incremental changes that can be verified, right? This gets into trying to be specific about steps and components, having an expectation before you start. Don't do more than is necessary to make minor changes so that you can track those changes and results. Then, make additional changes as necessary, but test and verify them along the way. Right? If we understand all of these concepts and then work with our organizations to help them operate in this fashion, it enables us to be more valuable to the organization as enablers of the business. And they can move much more easily and much more easily trust our capabilities. Don't fear the changes as your company's needs grow, and then we can have the ability to continue to provide value to the business, which leads to great things in your career. So, starting off with the PowerShell basics, right? Don't forget these as we're getting started. Follow the PowerShell way even when we're building our own tools. So first of all, remember what we learned about the PowerShell basics, looking at the help files. If you're still stuck and need more help after reading these help files, check out the examples or check out the online documentation. Other people are also normally glad to save you some pain within your journey. PowerShell pipeline, right? The pipeline concept is simple. First, get an object, then work with it. Once you learn how to leverage the pipeline to connect commandlets together, you'll see how quickly you can achieve some massive results within PowerShell. Stacking commandlets and results like Legos, right? Seriously, get some Legos to practice this. The new sets can be a complex final product with many distinct steps to get you to that final product that are not seen in the end result. This is why you should have an expected result at the start and then define the specific steps to achieve that result in the end. Forgetting what your parents and teachers taught you, right? Believe it or not, you can cheat from yourself. If you're really trying to learn a new product and you're trying to understand how to do things in PowerShell, you can actually learn from yourself sometimes. If you don't know where to find something in a code or find a specific setting, capture the object beforehand, create a new one, or change the existing object in the UI, and then pull it up in PowerShell to see how it was done and what changed, right? The path to get there doesn't really matter to the business as long as you achieve success. But at the same time for yourselves, you have to be careful with relying too much on searching, since searching is not the same as learning. You can teach these things to yourselves if you put in the effort, and you can always ask for help if you get stuck, which some of us forget. Focus on the result, right? That's really the only important thing, is just attaining that goal or desired result. But you also want to make sure that you're understanding why in the end. So let's get on to our real focus of Veeam and PowerShell, right? First, we're going to start with everything that we need to make sure that things are functioning for us here. For access to the PowerShell commandlets, you should have the console installed in whatever machine you're going to be running your code from. I typically suggest that this be installed in a jump box so that you can centrally manage Veeam and have a known location for all of your scripting to be run from. For Windows, you'll need to be a local administrator on the system running the console, and you should be running your PowerShell session with UAC elevation, right? Just right-click run as administrator. For full control of Veeam and access to all of the methods and properties, you are going to require the Veeam backup administrator role within Veeam. I typically suggest assigning this to a service account, just so you can connect to Veeam for all of your scripted functions and know where it's coming from. There are instances where you can and should leverage PowerShell remoting for running Veeam code, and I will have a specific scenario where I discuss this in one of the demos in part 2 of this session. So let's go ahead and dig into the basics of PowerShell and Veeam reporting itself. So deep dive here a little bit into some of the PowerShell components that we're going to be leveraging. There's a lot of meat in this one. So first point here about new dash object, PS object versus this PS object thing that's here, right? This refers to the method that is used when creating custom objects, right, or hash tables that we're going to be using for our reporting. Of these two that I have on the screen here, you should really be leveraging this PS custom object method on the right side. The new dash object PS object method uses PowerShell v2 functionality, whereas PS custom object here is a type accelerator, which also triggers some extra functionality in the PowerShell parser. One of the easiest benefits of this is the fact that it maintains the order of your properties assigned within your hash table as you put them in. Loops and filtering and using the pipeline. Be careful with too many loops, especially if each loop is actually querying specific information. This gets very expensive in terms of time to run. Sometimes you need to just think about the best way to filter down to specific objects that you're trying to report against. And in the end, sometimes it's better to collect all of your information quickly once and then filter those objects in memory using a method that's not available on a command line. We'll highlight some examples of this during the demos. Lastly, think about how you use the pipeline and test the best method to filter your data. You may end up moving from where-object commandlet to if statements to switch statements, and you may actually end up going to for each loops, where you can implement some complex logic, or even leverage regular express and matching. You'll also need to understand which of these methods require for you to have all data in memory to work with, and which methods allow you to filter on the pipeline. Arrays or collections within PowerShell, array lists, hash tables, and optimizing, right? Arrays will hurt your performance if you ever need to add items to a collection because they're built with a fixed size. Every time you use the old plus equals syntax on an array, a new array gets created, all of the items from the original array are copied to the new, and the old is deleted. That's very expensive at runtime, and it gets worse and worse the more and more objects that you have that you're trying to work with. For our purposes, leveraging an array list is a better option for gathering information and adding additional objects to a collection, like in a for each loop. Hash tables and optimizing. If you really want to get performant in your slicing and dicing of data within PowerShell, you should really research some about hash tables or even hash sets. The trade-off with some of the performance of optimizing in this way, though, is that your code moves away from the easier commandlets and methods that casual PowerShell users can read, understand, and leverage. If you don't absolutely need the performance at scale, consider the balance there of keeping it easier to maintain and be more readable to more of your users. The next point here, strings to arrays and arrays to strings, right? Just understanding the string brackets. Really, my only point here is just based on people being stuck in their code sometimes and just struggling with this concept. You really want to understand where you're working with an array and where you're working with a string. And also be sure to understand where a commandlet or a parameter on a commandlet can use multiple string values or an array of strings as seen on the screen here versus a single string value. That's going to be very critical sometimes to just make it a lot easier to pump in a lot of information at once to a commandlet. Formatting operators and regex. If you really want to elevate your reporting with PowerShell, then you'll want to be able to understand how you use formatting operators. Whether you are trying to simply set precision on your decimals, set padding for your numbers to ensure a set number of digits, display a percentage, display a date time in a specific format, or even do some simple variable substitution to have cleaner code, the -f format operator is a quick and easy way to do this. I see many people doing much harder things with manual string manipulation when this operator will do most things for you without a whole lot of effort, minus the searching of syntax. But since when do most of us in IT consider Googling to count as actual effort? And regex. Regex is vastly powerful and ridiculously fast when it comes to parsing out data and trying to match information from PowerShell. Take a look at it. There are plenty of resources available that I will also have linked in the slides at the end that will show you some very quick and easy ways to get up to speed with regex. Group object. This is a very handy and sometimes underused commandlet that groups objects with the same value. When you specify a property, your objects are going to be grouped together and you'll be given back this table, essentially, of a count with a number of elements inside of each group. It's very handy when you use it interactively, but then when you're reporting, you're going to also want to leverage the as hash table and as string parameters. To the earlier point that I made, having these hash tables of pre-grouped values can make it much quicker and easier to slice and dice through your data. If you're unaware of this commandlet, look it up and try it out. And then some handy PowerShell tools and scripts. There are lots of tools and scripts which are available to you that can help with your PowerShell reporting. I will show one of my regularly used PowerShell tools during my demos, but you can find lots of open source modules and scripts available to help you with all of the actual output and formatting for your code. Deal with you getting the data and doing the manipulation. Formatting comes later. We'll discuss this in session 2 as well. But you can also find lots of helpful Veeam example scripts in VeeamHub, which is our GitHub repository maintained by a few of us Veemers that I will also have linked in the resources at the end of this presentation. Okay, so let's start off with some quick Veeam and PowerShell demos. Initially here, I'm going to cover a new shell backup job, basically a job template, very handy for a lot of things, especially some of the stuff we're going to be testing here. I'm going to cover a few reports, one for a quick job status, one for restore points, one for backup size. I'm going to give a walkthrough of some standard Veeam agent deployments just so people kind of understand that process. And then we're going to dig into a backup session report, which is actually going to be PowerShell leveraging the Enterprise Manager API. So let's get started with the demos. Hello everyone, we're going to get started with this first set of demos here. So the first script we're going to demonstrate here is actually going to be creating a backup shell job, as I call it. Essentially this is going to be a blank job that's going to be a template. So we're just going to pull some information from what we have on the server already. We're going to connect to our Veeam server and we're going to list out the jobs that we have here. As you can see, I don't have anything in the list that's named PowerShell, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to set some variables. We're going to set a repository name, a backup job name, get information about our vCenter server and the VM itself. The trick for creating this template job essentially is we create a job, we add a VM to the job, and then we immediately remove the VM and it stays blank. As long as no one goes into the UI and clicks on the virtual machines tab, we can leave this job empty essentially. We can set all of our options, we can do everything else we want to the job to set it as defaults, use this as a base to clone for other jobs, but it just stays empty and blank inside of Veeam itself. So I'm just getting information for our repository, the vCenter server itself, so that I can search for the VM entity to come back. Now we're going to go ahead and run this one-liner to actually create the shell job itself. So we now have a new shell job created. We're going to take a look at the job objects on this job, and we're going to see we have our vCenter server. It's a type of virtual machine, and it is included on the job. Now I'm just going to get a variable of that job object to go ahead and remove it off of the job. So now if we do the same thing, if we go look at this new shell job, we're going to get back nothing, right? We have nothing on this job itself. So to pull some information about the job, just to show that this is new and was just created, right? Here is our PowerShell demo job. Here's our description we set for it. Modified shows that it was modified by me, and the latest run local shows that this was created today. Now if we go through and get information about our VBR job again, we will look and see we now have a new job name that exists on this server. Right? Okay, so we're done with script number 1. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at script number 2 that we have here. This is just to get us a quick job status, and we're going to take a look at some properties and methods for these jobs. So for the properties, I'm just going to start with these native properties that I want to pull back some information. So we've got job name, type, whether it's running, is it requiring a retry, is it enabled for a schedule, and what was the latest runtime on these. But let's say I want to go ahead and make some custom labels to make this a little prettier for our layout that we want. So we'll go ahead and create a hash table of calculated properties and select those properties with a select object statement and format it back out as a table, right? So it's just a little bit easier to consume that we can see the job type. Is it running? Does it require a retry? Is it scheduled? And these names are what we want them to be. So when we output this to a report, if we want to have this sitting here and living on disk, it's a little bit easier for us to see, what we have here inside of this information, because we can make these titles whatever is most relevant to us. So just, quick and easy thing we can do with some calculated properties. Now let's dig into the methods that we have available to us on this these job objects. So right here, I'm doing, the same thing. I'm doing some calculated properties, and I'm building these on the fly on the command line. And this gets to be pretty gnarly, right? So we'll go ahead and run this just to see what comes out of it. And I'm formatting everything back as a table again. But this gets kind of hard to maintain in your code, right? So what we want to do is we can, do the same thing again, build a calculated properties hash table, where this gets a little bit easier to read on the screen and see what it is that we're taking a look at. So we'll do the same thing. We're going to create this hash table. We're going to run our select object through it, format the table, and same results, but this, this is a lot easier to read on the screen, and it's a lot easier for us to maintain in source control. And again, same thing. We're just going to take this job information based on these methods and dump it out to disk, just so it's more easily consumable for us to have these as point-in-time reports. So that's all we got for script number 2. Okay, so we're actually going to take a look at a couple of scripts here that are going to be a restore point report. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and kick off actually with the stopwatch, just so we can get this going in the background. I want this one to finish before I run the second one, just to see what happens here. So what we're doing in this report actually is getting our backup files for all VMware backups. We want to get the restore points for these backups, and then we want to actually get the storage files themselves for these current backups to get some information. And then we're just reporting on specific properties that we want to go ahead and write out for these. And then the difference that we're going to have here between the slow and quick report is that for the object that we're creating here, we're using an array versus for slow versus an array list for the quicker version. And then for the slow version, we're also using new dash object PS object versus our PS custom object type accelerator for where we're actually creating our data and adding this to these collections that we're using here. So I'm going to go ahead and run the quicker version of this report, and we will see how long this takes to run here. So the slow version was 5.64 seconds, and then we've got 5.4 seconds for the quicker version. Not a drastic difference, but if we actually take a look at the data that comes back in this report here, we can actually take a look and see that all I'm reporting against here is 208 restore points. So 208 restore points is very small for a lot of environments. This is really just a small lab environment that I have here. So it's not a ton of data, but there's a slight difference that you can see in performance here, from 5.64 seconds to 5.4 seconds against even only 200 objects here that we're pulling back out of this information. So this is going to grow exponentially. So just different things to think about or to test and see what your performance looks like as we're running these reports within production. Okay, so for script 4, we're actually going to take a look at essentially the same code that we have here, where we're just writing one as a point-in-time script, and version 2 of this thing, like the quicker time, is actually going to be a function where we're being able to call in these parameters rather than them being hard-coded in the script file. There's not a whole lot else for difference that's in here, other than the fact that for our array, similar to what we had in the other demo in script number 3. We're using the plus equals format in the slow version of this, and we're actually using our .add method that exists for an array list for all of these things on the Veeam backup size for the quick version of this. So let me go ahead and run the slow one so we can go ahead and get this started. So I have this one completed before we get a timing on the quicker one. And essentially what we're doing in the script, we're getting our backup, we're getting some job VMs. Okay, this error that I have here is actually because I've got a blank demo job in here that has no backups on it, so that's reporting that I can't pull one of these methods. But I'm getting our backups. I'm getting all the VMs that are within these jobs where we're targeting backup and backup copy jobs of virtual machines, vSphere VMs themselves. Then we're getting all the storage points that exist on disk for these, just to get the size of this information, right, and tie them back to which repository that they live on. And in the end, for all of this calculation that we're doing for this, I'm getting back, a job, a VM name, a timestamp for these files themselves, what's the size on disk, and then what's this backup cost, where we assign just a random, price per gig. I think I gave it, 15 cents for these or whatever. And we're having to do a little bit different methodology where, I'm pulling out information based on if these are on a per VM repository or if they are on, repositories where we're just doing bulk backup chains. So we can actually report back the names of the VMs that are inside of these if possible. Otherwise, we just give back a count. So we've got 6 seconds on the slow version of the script. Let's run the quicker version of this and see what we get here. This should be slightly quicker. We're going to see the same, can't call a method on a null valued expression here, and 5.41 seconds. So from 6.19 to 5.4 is actually a decently significant difference for the number of files that we have here that we're reporting on. So if I take a look at this and I go, this is only for 160 backup files that I have inside of this lab environment. So pretty significant difference for timing and pulling this information using a couple of different methods that are just a little bit quicker to pull this data. So again, just things to consider about when you're doing some testing on how to pull information inside of your environment. So we can go ahead and close this window, and we can expand our Visual Studio Code for the next couple of these. The next demo that we have here is actually just creating a protection scope for agents themselves, right? So for this, we're actually creating a protection scope based on the CSV files. So if you want to be able to control all of the agents that are being backed up in a particular job by a CSV file, here's a sample of doing that. We've got a CSV, we're going to set the repository, we're going to set what day of the week and what time we want these backups to be. And then we're going to set a schedule for this thing at these particular times. We're going to pull credentials that we have within Veeam. We're going to set credentials to pull the CSV file that we have off of this file share. We're going to set when we want this periodic discovery cycle to go to deploy the agents if necessary on new systems. And then we're going to set that schedule with these periodic scanning options. We're going to wrap all of this together after we pull the CSV container and give it the credentials. We now have our CSV to actually target all of these systems to put into this protection group. Then this protection group gets assigned, and then we create a computer job where we're targeting Windows systems that are server type, that are going to be managed by the Veeam backup server. We're setting in our protections group that we created here. The backup type is going to be entire computer, and we are enabling this schedule that we have here based on all of these components that got put together. And really, this is just to kind of show everyone that, this is some good information you can get. Most of this is actually covered in the examples in the PowerShell guide for Veeam, just to understand that there are a lot of different components that come to you actually creating just a job by itself, right? There's a lot of components that are necessary in here. So a lot of times it's easiest to just go take a look at the documentation, and you can understand what are all of the components that are kind of needed in this workflow to put these things together. And then for one last, quick kind of demonstration and explanation that we've got here, this is actually a script that looks at backup sessions from the API itself. So the information I've got in here right at the top, it's just, accepting self-signed certs. I'm setting in a couple of variables that I've got here for, my enterprise manager, username, password, a job name that I'm targeting, and where I'm actually writing this information out on the file. If you have not worked with APIs, and if you've not looked at some of our examples for the Veeam API with PowerShell, this is a pretty generic, set of blocks of code. Basically, all I'm doing here is I'm connecting to the REST API. I'm pulling back the links that I need. I'm going to look up a query for the jobs, which says, I want to go actually find this job, and I want to filter to this particular job name that I'm creating this variable here. And I go pull back this information. And really what this gets us to is just within the API, sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand all these components and how they're a little bit linked. So from this list of job names that I get back, I can actually go dig into these and say, from this job, I want to get the backup sessions. And for all of these sessions that are in here, for the backup session, I want to get the associated task sessions that are linked on these. For all of these task sessions in the list, I want to get back information about these restore points that are here. Right, and for all of these restore points, that I want to just pull back specific information of the actual entity that's within all of these job and task sessions, and then I'm pulling back just information to say I want to get a VM name. What was the time that a backup was started and finished? What was the status of it? What's the end result? And if there was any failure, what was the reason for this thing? And just writing this information out to a CSV file. My only real point for bringing up the API here and walking through it with PowerShell is just the fact that, sometimes as opposed to the native PowerShell commandlets, it's a little bit easier to understand from the API where these things are connected, because you get back reference links that kind of show you where there's a tree of different objects and properties that you can walk through and pull some information. And we're back from the demos, so now we're going to start digging in a little bit deeper. So the next thing we're going to discuss is Veeam PowerShell objects, right? Or really, where are we going to be starting with reporting? So the objects that we're going to be digging into primarily are going to be like our jobs. These are the jobs that run in the environment, right? Whether it's your backup copy, replication, or tape jobs. And these will probably be one of the most regularly used based objects for the majority of your reporting. Job objects. This is going to be the representation of Veeam, VMs or agents within your backup jobs that are the actual workloads that you're backing up in the jobs themselves. Job options. This one gets a little heavy pretty quick. These options are what will control just about everything for your Veeam jobs, right? Including your scheduling, the backup mode, their VM source options as far as change block tracking and encryption and handling of dirty blocks and swap files, all of your storage and target settings, all of the things for your storage integrations as well. Backups, right? This is going to be the logical container, which is the backups that are actually created by backup and backup copy jobs, VCD jobs, or Veeam agent jobs, as well as replication jobs. This is also going to include any of your backups that you have that are going to show up as imported from disk, right? These are going to be files where we have the backup of the metadata for a backup chain where the job itself is no longer contained within Veeam, but we know about it because it's living on disk. Restore points. This is going to be referring to all restore points that are contained within the Veeam backup and replication database, including those from older sessions that are not within your retention period anymore. So some historical data that we can dig into about these restore points. Sessions. This is referring to multiple types of sessions that we're going to be looking into here. Job sessions, task sessions, tape sessions, and restore sessions. And then kind of a pro tip for everyone here. When you're really trying to get some information out of Veeam, especially when you're trying to do things for reporting, to make it a little bit easier for yourself, start first with looking at the top-level info property for the most common details of just about any Veeam object. Now let's go ahead and dig into a few demos about the PowerShell types and methods. And the warning that I've got for everybody here, just a funny haha, here be dragons, right? This is where we're going to start getting off a little bit more into the undocumented methods that are available to us in Veeam that are very performant, but are, again, undocumented, and they're not the native, easy-to-use PowerShell commandlets, right? So we're going to start discussing finding commandlets by parameter type. This is just a PowerShell basic to understand how to link things together in the pipeline. We're going to actually show how to discover the Veeam types and methods and how you can quickly dump those out to a CSV file. We have a separate script for dumping the Veeam objects themselves to understand what methods and properties are available on those. And then we're going to show a quick demo on Veeam general settings, mostly because these are not actually covered by the native PowerShell commandlets, but they're actually within VeeamON. So let's go ahead and get started with these demos. Okay, and we're back for our next block of demos. So we're going to start off with one that's actually a little bit of a PowerShell basic, right? It's being able to understand what commandlets that we can use based on a parameter type. So what we're looking at here for a Veeam backup job is that we have a type name of veeam.backup.core.c backup job. So let's go ahead and get the short name of this type that we want to leverage here, and we can see that the type name that we're working with is a C backup job. So let's go ahead and find what other commands that we have that we can leverage with a parameter type of C backup job. So based on this, I've got quite a few commandlets that come back here. If we go ahead and pipe this to a measure on the fly, if Joe can type, looks like we've got 59 commandlets that we can actually pipe to here. So let's say we want to go ahead and look at whatever we can use to leverage the add verb. And we come back with quite a few where we can add a VBR job object, we can add a tape VM job, we can add a sure backup job to these. We have lots of things that we can do with a backup job type, and for set, we have quite a few options that we have, right? Once we have our job in a variable or in memory, or just on the pipeline, we can set, advanced backup options, advanced notification options, advanced options, all of these on a particular job, right? Or we can set what proxy that we're using for these. We can set the scheduling, right? We can set VI replicate jobs based on a source job type. So very good to know how to get commands that are associated with a particular parameter type so that you can figure out what it is that you can actually leverage within the pipeline on PowerShell. Okay, with this next script, what we're going to take a look at is actually digging in a little bit to understand the types and methods that we have available to us with Veeam. So first, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the assemblies that I've got loaded here. You can see all of this is just the native default, PowerShell stuff that's built in. What I want to do now is add in our Veeam PS snap-in and pull my assemblies again. So for this, basically, I want to set this in a variable for these assemblies. And basically, what I'm trying to do now is just get down to where the ones that match Veeam, right? So I want to get to this location that does a regex match for Veeam to get back these. So now I'm restricted to the DLLs that are just for the Veeam stuff. Same thing, going to put it in a variable and list them out again. Okay. So now that I'm working with all of the assemblies for Veeam, I want to get the types that are available. So let's go get these. Well, So I actually got the type of the Veeam assemblies array itself. So that's not very helpful. So what it is that I actually need to do is I need to expand this. I need to get the assemblies themselves and run a get types for each of these. So I want to get back the types of objects that exist within all of these DLLs for these Veeam assemblies. And let's go ahead and start dumping these out. And, whoa, that's a ton. To make this a little bit easier to work with, what we're actually going to do here is run through this for each loop here. So for each of these current assemblies within Veeam, I want to go get the types that exist, and I want to get the methods that exist, and basically just put these out to a CSV file that I can append information from. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy and paste, and let's let this run. And I want to warn everybody, this one's going to take a few minutes, so I will be back once this is done, and we can take a look at these CSV files to see what we've got here. Okay, so now that we've got the CSV files back and we have them loaded up, we can take a look here. So for types, filtered out a couple of the names just to make it easier to get a little further down the list to some things that might be a little bit more recognizable to us. So this name property is going to be basically the short name of any type. So you can pipe this into get command for your parameter name to understand what it is you're looking on, or you can actually just look up the types themselves to see what's available for us. If we really want to start digging into methods, same thing as well. I've actually filtered this list back to give us just the methods that exist on a backup itself, and we can see the names of all of the methods that exist. This is a pretty quick and easy way to dump a lot of information, and from these methods, it's pretty quick and easy to go back and find all of the overloads that we need to effectively use these. So hopefully that will help you out in your discovery journey. Let's go ahead and close these out and move on to the next script. So for this next one, for dumping VBR objects themselves, this is actually an example script that comes straight out of VeeamHub. This was written by Timothy DeWin. Anybody who's seen the Restore Point simulator is aware of Timothy and his fantastic work. This runs through quite a few loops to basically just go get back particular members that are from here and run through a string builder to dump out one quick markdown file that'll actually give you back quite a bit of information about objects within your environment. So we're going to capture, a VBR job. We're going to get a backup. We're going to get job objects, job options, schedule options. The VSS information back about backup storage, restore points, some sessions, and dump all of this out to disk. So a fantastic, VBR dump report that's living out there on Veeam Hub if you want to take a look at all of the objects within your environment. And we will have that linked in the resources as well. So now digging into some of the Veeam general options. Really, I want to show this one just for the fact that some of these general options are actually contained within WMI, so you're not going to have native commandlets for this. Right here, we're taking a look at the storage latency details that pop up in the Veeam general options UI. So we're taking a look at our storage latency, when we stop assigning tasks latency, and then throttle existing tasks latency. So right now I'd have storage latency disabled in my environment, and I had just the default values set back, but this is just showing you that we're pulling some information back out of WMI using get sim instance from the backup server on OS-Veeam BR in my lab environment to get back this information, because this is essentially hidden if you're just using the native Veeam PowerShell commandlets, because that's just not something that exists here. If I really want to take a look and see some other stuff that's here, I can actually use this show object commandlet, which was one of the handy Veeam tools handy PowerShell tools that I mentioned that I was going to be showing in my examples. So from this backup server, right, I'm digging into this information that comes back from WMI. It gives me a nice, pretty tree view for a lot of this information. So this is my Veeam VBR server itself, and these are just the objects that actually come back even from a WMI class within this sim session here. Where I'm getting back all of these properties, right? So I'm digging into whether or not parallel processing is enabled, parallel tasks is enabled. I want to go take a look at is my configuration backup enabled? I can easily take a look at that from the sim details that are here. So let's do that. Let's say sim details dot is configuration backup enabled. True. So hey, that's very good. I've got configuration backups enabled in my environment. So hopefully you guys can leverage this show object commandlet, and you will understand that there are some general options that are available through WMI. And we're back. So after those demos, it's now time to dig in a little bit more on Veeam reporting itself, right? A little bit deeper dive into some of the things we're going to try and pull out and some of the more common requests that I get for information to help people with. So the first report we're going to dig into here in this next demo is going to be a server configuration report. It's really going to be kind of a quick dump of a lot of the information we have for Veeam itself and a lot of the components that exist on that VBR server. Then we're going to get into task session status and log details in a lengthy script that we've got about that. We're going to cover Veeam exclusions, just because this one's a pretty quick, handy thing to look at, because the exclusions are not quickly and easily accessible to compare across jobs within the UI. And then a handy script that I actually put together specifically for this VeeamON demo, which is VMs not backed up. And this script is going to take a look at your vCenter environment versus your Veeam jobs and backups. And we're going to do a quick comparison of VMs and tags contained within vCenter to the VMs and tags that are actually within your job objects, and then with the actual backups that live on disk to show where we have a difference here. So let's dig into the in-depth report demos. Okay, we're back for the last demo block that we've got here for part one of this session. These are going to be just some pre-canned reports that I've got that have been, come out of our environment, out of needs for the SEs or customer requests that we've had. So this first one is actually just a function that will dump a quick configuration of the Veeam environment here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this and let it start to go in the background while I explain kind of what's going on here. So for this, we're connecting to the Veeam server, and really all we're doing is pulling back some information about all the managed servers that we have in the environment, the jobs, the proxies, repositories, and then the scale-out repositories to pull some information back about all of these and just get some details about, all of the extents that live on all the servers. And we just want to dump out quickly, like all the managed servers or jobs or proxies with a handful of information on these things. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. Let's explore to this directory and see what comes back. So if I open up these CSVs, quickly here, we can just take a look and see, we've got information about our jobs. We've got information about all of the hosts that come back. This is my scale out repository information that comes here. These are all of my proxies that I've got for all of my jobs. Paths, credential IDs, tags, whether or not they're connected or not connected, all sorts of information that comes back. Same thing for my managed servers. I can see all of the servers that I have in my environment, as well as what types of servers that they are, which is very handy to see for a quick dump of your Veeam configurations. So just a handy way to grab quite a bit of information all at once. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next script. Okay, the next example we're going to take a look at here is actually pulling out some information from Veeam sessions. And what I'm actually looping through here is getting information about jobs, getting information about backup sessions, getting information about task sessions, and then even parsing some details out of the log. So in the end, the root of the information I'm getting here is a job name, a VM name, what was the status of a particular task session, was it a retry, what was the processing mode that we used? Was this, network backup mode? Is this hot add? Is this, SAN attached, direct storage snapshots that are coming out? And I'm parsing this actually out of the log using some regex. And then basic details about, how long did the job run take? How long did the task take? When was it created? What's the backup size? What's the data size? What's the dedupe ratio and compress ratio? So I'm going to go ahead and kick off actually the slow version of this script and the quick version of this script, and we will let these start running in the background to see what they're going to give us for run times. And then we will take a look at the performance improvements in kind of V2 of the script. So the next change for the script that I did was, just based on seeing how it took to run when this kind of went into a larger environment, we had to rework it a little bit. All of the nested for each loops that we had here, one per job, one per backup session, one per task session, and then for all of the matches within the log, just kind of killed us on performance once we really went and started digging into it. So that was great for an initial pass and a test in somebody's lab environment. But then, when it really came time to perform and we needed to optimize and tune this thing a little bit, it became better to just go grab all this information at once, right? So now we're going and getting all of our jobs, all of our backup job IDs, the sessions, backup sessions and the task sessions. We're getting, all of the information. We're actually pulling additional information out of the log for, what was our processing mode, what was the bottleneck, what was the primary bottleneck, and running through a couple of additional things of this. And basically, without these nested for each loops, you can see this runs pretty quick based on the results that just came back here. And I'm parsing out essentially the same information. I'm even adding a couple of properties here for bottleneck details and the primary bottleneck. And if we take a look, the initial version of this script is actually still running here. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to come back once this runs and completes so we can actually see what the difference is based on these additional for each loops here. Okay, so we've now actually had both of these Veeam session report runs from these scripts here, and as you can see, the newer version where I'm just parsing out information and I'm doing just some slicing and dicing and kind of matching things up took about 36 seconds, whereas with all of the for each loops for all the task sessions that I was running through, the original version of the script took 631 seconds. So obviously quite a big difference here in processing time, and think about the fact that this is for a small lab environment. So again, just think about the fact that for each loops and doing specific queries for information within each nested loop is going to be very, very pricey for runtime. Okay, the next script we're going to take a look at here is actually going to be some information about disk filters. I'm going to go ahead and load this function and let it start running in the background so we can take a look at the results in just a few seconds here. As you can see, that was pretty quick here. So what we're doing is we're connecting to the server, we're creating an array list to just hold our output. And we're going to get information about our jobs, about our backup repositories, and then for each of these jobs, I'm just linking together the information, right? What is the backup repository that's associated with this particular backup that's here? And I'm getting the VM objects that exist within the job here using this get vi oij's method here. And then I'm parsing through each of the current jobs that are in the current VMs that are in the job to get back the information about what specific disks are filtered, right? Am I allowing all disks or did I specify some disks? And this is just information that's not quickly and easily visible within the UI. Requires a lot of clicking into submenus to get this information. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what it comes back with. So at a quick glance, I can see between all of the jobs that I have inside of this environment, these all look fine except for the fact that I've got some VMs where I'm pulling back only system disks, only selected disks that are here, and I want all disks inside of my environment. So this is just a quick, easy way to take a look at some details that are here and say, "Ooh, man, maybe this is something I need to modify, I need to change here." So let's go ahead and get back to the next script. Okay, the final demo script we're going to dig into here is actually one that came up just for the purposes of VeeamON, really. It kind of came up at the same time that a customer was asking for this request, so it gave me a little bit of time to just go ahead and kind of sit down and interactively just write this up. So it's not a fully built function. This is really just kind of a point script that was built as just a POC to go pull out some information. But essentially, we had a customer that wanted to know, I'm leveraging VMs directly by name as well as VMs by tag inside of my jobs, and I want to find out where I've got gaps. So this pulls out some information about the jobs and the job objects, and it splits them out into VMs versus tag objects and pulls back all of the unique ones with some custom properties that I'm putting here. So for the VMs, I'm actually tagging them with the name, the job ID, the MoRef ID, and the UUID, along with the vCenter server that they're associated with. Similarly for tags, I'm pulling out name, a job ID, a path for the tag, and a vCenter server. And I'm leveraging all this information to actually go in and say, go pull this information from these VBR VI entities for the VMs and the templates and for the tags to get back this information. Then I'm creating an array list of job missing VMs, job covered VMs, and similarly backup missing VMs and backup covered VMs. And through a little bit of matching in a pretty simple for each loop with some if statements here, I'm actually just going through and I'm associating all of this information together. So I'm getting back an informational list of VMs that are in or not in jobs and VMs that are in or not in backups as well. And then I'm parsing out information about which are duplicated for within a job or within a VM. And if any of these are found, I'm writing them out to the console here. So let's go ahead and run the script and kind of see what these results look like. The script shouldn't take too long. Okay, so I did find that there are 2 VMs that are duplicated in my backups actually. So let's go ahead and take a look at this compliance report. So let's start with the job covered VMs, missing VMs, and then backup covered and missing VMs. And let's open these up. So pretty simply here, I can see I have quite a few VMs inside of my environment that are actually missing from jobs. And most of this is the fact that this is actually a legacy vCenter server where I migrated the hosts off the vCenter, but they're still registered on the old vCenter. So they're known about in Veeam based off of duplicate, VM IDs that live on an old vCenter server. And then I have quite a few that are just other nested lab environments that are not covered in jobs right now. Similarly, if I go look at the job covered VMs, I'll get back a name, a MoRef ID, specific UUID, a path for where these are, and then the vCenter server that these are associated with, and whether they were added to a job by a VM name or by a tag. Same thing for backup missing VMs. This is all the VMs that are known about in my virtual environment that are not covered by backups. So similar information because I have again that legacy vCenter server that still has lots of registered VMs where these are no longer valid. And then backup covered VMs as well, right? I'm listing out all of the backups that I have. What are the specific MoRef UUIDs and paths for these VMs that are in the backups themselves? So pretty handy information. And then if I want to take a look, I've actually got the list of those duplicated backup VMs that are listed out here as well. So these are the 2 VMs where I see I actually have duplicate backups of these VMs. So pretty handy, quick and easy scripts to just go through and pull some information out to compare from your vCenter environment to your Veeam environment. All right, hope that helps everyone. And we're back from our final demo session. So now we're on to the additional resources. So as I told everyone, I was going to warn you when this came up. So take a snapshot of this screen or check in the chat for the link to this. I will just drop in the link for that bit.ly link at the bottom. This goes to a GitHub repository where I have all of this information. We'll have the slides available and things like this. But quick and easy things you should know when you're trying to work with Veeam and PowerShell, right? You're going to want to understand the Veeam PowerShell types. You can do a quick, easy reference online to the documentation and help center for the types and the enumerations rather than having to dig through a lot of these things on disk or dump them out to CSV files. So make sure you keep those 2 links. They're very handy when you're using Veeam PowerShell commandlets. Veeam Hub, again, is the GitHub repository that I mentioned that's owned and maintained by quite a few of us Veeamers. It's great for example scripts. A lot of these resources that are here in the demo are accessible as well in Veeam Hub or will be up there soon. And then handy PowerShell scripts, right? This one is just that show-object commandlet that I was leveraging for a couple of the demos to quickly and easily have that tree view of an object within PowerShell. That's contained in the PowerShell cookbook module that's on the PS Gallery, so be sure you go grab that. And then, next steps for everyone. If you're unaware of these or have not looked at them in a while, go back and check out Veeam University. We have some fantastic free and on-demand training for everyone available. We have a great repository of Veeam white papers that are out there that span back quite a few years and will teach you lots of things about the Veeam product, how and why it works, and especially how to leverage us with some of our partner platforms as well. And then technical documentation. Everybody should know and love Help Center. Help Center is great, especially if you were trying to do things with Veeam and PowerShell. You're going to have tons of documentation out there. If anyone needs additional help or resources with this, like I said, I will have more written up documentation on a lot of these scripts within the PowerShell scripts on that GitHub repository that I linked here for the resources. You can also go check out the Veeam forums. There's a fantastic customer forum for getting assistance with PowerShell and API. I am in there a lot, try and help out a lot of people whenever they pop in and ask questions and need help. You can also follow Veeam on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I will call out YouTube specifically. We have a great new series of how-to videos that are out there that our COE team is presenting. Some great light boards that run through some really good concepts of how to use the product. So with that, thank you all for coming out and attending this session, and I hope to see you all in session 2.